The words hung in the air like poison, every syllable designed to cut deep. "You're not man enough to provide for my daughter the way she deserves." Patricia Sullivan stood in my living room, her arms crossed, her face twisted in contempt, as she looked me up and down like I was something she had scraped off her shoe. A real man would have given her the life I raised her to expect. I stood there in silence, my hands clenched at my side, every muscle in my body tight with restrained anger. My wife Lauren sat on the couch, saying nothing, her eyes fixed on her phone, not defending me, not even looking up. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors that I had installed myself in the house that I had bought, filled with furniture I had paid for. And here was my mother-in-law, in my home, telling me I wasn't man enough. This wasn't the first time Patricia had belittled me. It wasn't even the 10th time. But something about this particular moment, this particular insult, felt different. Maybe it was the way Lauren didn't even pretend to disagree. Maybe it was the exhaustion of 5 years of trying to prove myself to a woman who would never be satisfied. Or maybe it was just that I had finally reached my limit. "I see," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly calm, given the storm raging inside me. "And what exactly would make me man enough in your eyes, Patricia?" She scoffed, a sharp sound of derision. "For starters, you could have bought Lauren a proper house in Oakmont instead of this modest little place. You could drive something better than that ordinary sedan. You could take her on the kind of vacations I took her on when she was growing up. But I suppose that's asking too much from someone in your position." My position. I was a civil engineer for the city, a job that paid well and came with excellent benefits and a pension. I had a master's degree from a respected state university. I owned this house outright, had no debt except a reasonable car payment, and had been steadily building our savings and retirement accounts. By any objective measure, I was doing fine, better than fine. But to Patricia, I would never be enough because I hadn't inherited wealth like her late husband had. I had earned everything through work and education, and somehow that made me lesser in her eyes. "I provide everything Lauren needs," I replied, still keeping my voice level. "We have a nice home, financial security, and a good life." Patricia laughed, cold and sharp. "A good life? Please. My daughter grew up in a 5,000-square-foot house with a pool and a 3-car garage. She went to private schools, spent summers in Europe, wore designer clothes, and now look at her, living in this little 1,500-square-foot box, shopping at regular stores, driving a basic car. You've brought her down, Nathan. That's what you've done." I looked at Lauren, waiting for her to say something, anything. We had talked about this before, about her mother's constant criticism, about how we were building our own life according to our own values. Lauren had always assured me that she was happy, that she didn't need her mother's version of success, that she loved the life we were creating together. But now, sitting on our couch, she just kept scrolling through her phone, her silence speaking volumes. "Lauren," I said, my voice cracking slightly, "are you going to say something here?" She finally looked up, her expression weary and annoyed. "Nathan, don't make this into a big thing. You know how Mom is. Just let it go. Just let it go." How many times had she said that over the years? How many insults was I supposed to absorb? How much disrespect was I supposed to tolerate, all in the name of keeping the peace? Patricia smiled, sensing victory. "You see, even Lauren knows I'm right. She's just too kind to say it to your face. But a mother knows what her daughter really feels, Nathan. She misses the life she had before you." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not broke, exactly, but transformed. The hurt and anger crystallized into something else. Clarity. For the first time in 5 years, I saw the situation exactly as it was, without the filter of love or hope or desperation to make it work. I turned and walked out of the living room, grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, and left my own house. Behind me, I heard Patricia say something to Lauren, heard them both laugh. I got in my car and drove. No destination in mind, just needing to be anywhere but there. 5 years. 5 years of marriage to Lauren, 5 years of trying to win over her impossible mother, 5 years of sacrifice and effort and bending over backward to prove I was worthy. And for what? To stand in my own home and be told I wasn't man enough while my wife sat silent and let it happen. I drove to the park by the river, the same park where I had proposed to Lauren 6 years ago. It had been a perfect autumn evening, the leaves turning gold and crimson, the air crisp and clean. I had planned everything carefully, had gotten her father's blessing before he passed away from a heart attack 2 years into our marriage, had chosen a ring I knew she would love. When she said yes, I had felt like the luckiest man alive. Her father, Richard, had been nothing like Patricia. He was a self-made man who had built a successful commercial real estate business from the ground up. He treated me with respect from day one, saw value in my work ethic and education, encouraged me to pursue my career goals. When he died suddenly at 62, it had devastated the whole family, but it had also removed the one buffer between me and Patricia's unfiltered judgment. Richard had left his estate to Patricia, including their large house, his business holdings, and substantial investments. Patricia sold the business for several $1,000,000 and had been living off the proceeds ever since, along with Richard's life insurance and pension. She had more money than she could spend in her lifetime, but it had done nothing to make her more generous or kind. If anything, wealth had made her more entitled, more convinced of her own superiority. I sat in my car at the park, watching joggers pass by and families playing with their dogs, people living normal, peaceful lives unencumbered by toxic in-laws. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from Lauren. I ignored them, not ready to engage, not sure what I would even say. Instead, I let myself think back to the beginning, to before Patricia's constant criticism had worn me down. I had met Lauren at a professional networking event 7 years ago. She was working in marketing for a boutique firm, and I had just been promoted to project manager at the engineering company. We started talking about a revitalization project downtown that we were both tangentially involved with, and the conversation had flowed easily, naturally. Lauren had been charming and funny, quick-witted with a slightly sarcastic sense of humor that balanced my more serious nature. She was beautiful too, with auburn hair and green eyes, tall and athletic from years of playing tennis. We started dating within a week of meeting, and for those first months, everything felt effortless. She had been upfront about her privileged background, but she didn't seem entitled about it. She told me she wanted to make her own way in the world, that she was tired of being seen as just Richard Sullivan's daughter. She talked about building a career, about being independent, about choosing a partner based on character rather than bank account balance. I had believed her completely. Meeting Patricia for the first time should have been a warning sign. We went to her house for Sunday dinner 3 months into dating, and from the moment I walked through the door, I felt her judgment. She asked pointed questions about my family background, my education, my career prospects. When I mentioned my parents were both teachers and had put 3 kids through state universities on their modest salaries, Patricia had smiled thinly and said, "How admirable. Education is so important, even if it doesn't lead to significant financial success." Lauren had laughed it off afterward, told me her mother was just protective, that she would warm up once she got to know me. But Patricia never warmed up. If anything, she became more critical as our relationship progressed, more vocal about her belief that Lauren was settling. Despite Patricia's disapproval, Lauren and I had gotten engaged. Richard had been genuinely happy for us, had shaken my hand firmly and told me he was glad Lauren had found someone solid and reliable. Patricia had barely managed to fake a smile during the announcement dinner. The wedding had been a source of constant tension. Patricia wanted a massive affair at an exclusive country club with 300 guests, a wedding that would have cost more than I made in a year. I wanted something smaller and more meaningful. We compromised on a ceremony and reception at a nice hotel with 150 guests, but Patricia complained about every detail, compared it unfavorably to weddings of Lauren's childhood friend, made snide comments about budgeting constraints. I had paid for half the wedding despite tradition dictating the bride's family cover those costs, because Patricia made it clear she would only contribute if she had total control over decisions. Lauren and I split the costs with her parents, a gesture I thought showed partnership and independence. Patricia saw it as proof that I couldn't afford to give her daughter a proper wedding. The early years of marriage had been good despite Patricia's presence on the periphery of our lives. Lauren and I had rented a nice apartment downtown, both focused on our careers, enjoying the freedom of being young professionals in the city. We traveled when we could, hosted friends for dinner parties, talked about our future with excitement and optimism. Then Richard died, and everything changed. Patricia suddenly needed Lauren constantly. Emergency phone calls at all hours about problems that weren't really emergencies. Demands that Lauren come over to help with things Patricia could easily afford to hire people to handle. Guilt trips about being left alone in her grief. Lauren, devastated by the loss of her father, tried to be there for her mother, and I supported that. But it never seemed to be enough for Patricia, and her criticism of me became more frequent and more pointed. A year after Richard's death, we bought our current house. It was a huge milestone for us, our first real property, a 3-bedroom ranch with a nice yard and a good neighborhood. The mortgage payment was well within our budget, and I was proud of what we were building together. But when Patricia saw it, her first words were, "Oh, it's smaller than I expected." I had spent months renovating that house, doing much of the work myself on weekends. New floors, updated kitchen, fresh paint throughout. Every room represented hours of my labor, sweat, and vision for our future. But Patricia saw only what it wasn't. A mansion like the one she lived in, courtesy of Richard's decades of hard work. Over the following years, I made sacrifices I never talked about. I turned down a job offer from a private firm that would have paid 40% more because it would have required extensive travel, and Lauren wanted me home. I postponed my dream of getting a PhD in structural engineering because the time commitment would have taken away from our marriage. I contributed to Patricia's various causes and charities, writing checks for fundraisers and galas that Lauren insisted we support to keep her mother happy. I helped Patricia with house repairs and maintenance, spending my precious free weekends fixing her fence, updating her electrical outlets, even redesigning her landscape drainage system when she complained about water pooling in her yard. She never thanked me. She just pointed out other things that needed attention, other ways I could make myself useful. When Lauren's brother, Kevin, went through a rough patch and needed a place to stay, I welcomed him into our guest room for 6 months, never complaining even though his presence strained our finances and privacy. When Patricia needed someone to help her navigate the complexities of her investment portfolio after Richard died, I spent countless hours researching and advising her, making sure she didn't get taken advantage of by unscrupulous financial advisors. She rewarded that effort by telling her friends I was handy with numbers, at least. I gave and gave and gave, always hoping it would be enough, always believing that eventually Patricia would see my worth, would recognize the dedication and love I showed her daughter and her family. But the goalpost kept moving. Every achievement was minimized, every effort was insufficient, every sacrifice was expected rather than appreciated. Sitting in my car at the park, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon, I finally let myself acknowledge what I had been refusing to see. I was never going to be enough for Patricia because she didn't want me to be enough. She enjoyed having someone to look down on, someone to blame for her daughter not living the exact life Patricia had envisioned. And Lauren had let it happen, had enabled her mother's behavior, had chosen to keep the peace rather than stand up for her husband. My phone rang. Lauren. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. Finally, I turned it off completely. I drove to my buddy Marcus's apartment across town. Marcus and I had been friends since college, had stayed close even as our lives took different paths. He was a software engineer, perpetually single by choice, living an uncomplicated life that suddenly seemed very appealing. "Nathan?" Marcus answered the door in gym shorts and a faded t-shirt, his expression shifting to concern when he saw my face. "Man, what happened? You look like you've been hit by a truck. Can I crash here tonight?" I asked. "I just need somewhere to think." "Of course. Come in." He stepped aside and I entered his neat, minimalist apartment. "Beer? Food? Both? Both sounds good." We sat on his couch with pizza and beer, and I told him everything. The confrontation with Patricia, Lauren's silence, the years of criticism and disrespect, the slow erosion of my self-worth under the constant barrage of judgment. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. "Dude," he said when I finished, "you know this is messed up, right? Like, seriously dysfunctional? You've been putting up with emotional mistreatment for years." "I love Lauren," I said, but the words felt automatic, rehearsed, lacking conviction. "Do you? Or do you love who you thought she was? Because the woman you're describing, the one who sits there and lets her mother trash you in your own house, that doesn't sound like someone who respects you. And without respect, What is love really worth? His words hit me like cold water. I wanted to argue, to defend Lauren, to explain all the good things about our marriage. But sitting there in Marcus's apartment, away from the immediate emotion of the situation, I couldn't think of the last time Lauren had made me feel valued, appreciated, or prioritized. When had she last done something thoughtful just for me? When had she last defended me to her mother? When had she last looked at me with the warmth and admiration I saw in the eyes of other happily married friends when they looked at their spouses? I don't know what to do, I admitted. I'm so tired, Marcus. I'm tired of trying to prove myself. I'm tired of not being enough. I'm tired of living with this constant undercurrent of disapproval. Then stop, Marcus said simply. Stop trying to prove yourself to people who don't want to be convinced. Stop accepting treatment you don't deserve. Stop living a life that makes you miserable. I stayed at Marcus's that night, sleeping fitfully on his couch, my mind churning through scenarios and possibilities. When I finally turned my phone back on the next morning, I had 17 missed calls from Lauren and 6 from Patricia. The voicemails from Lauren ranged from annoyed to worried. The ones from Patricia were pure venom, accusing me of being childish and irresponsible for walking out. I didn't call back. Instead, I showered, borrowed a shirt from Marcus, and went to work. I threw myself into my current project, a complicated bridge rehabilitation that required all my focus and attention. My colleagues noticed I was quieter than usual, but they didn't pry. I was grateful for the normalcy of work, for problems that had clear solutions, and efforts that produced measurable results. During my lunch break, I did something I had never done before. I called a family law attorney. Linda Chen had been recommended by a colleague who had gone through a divorce several years earlier. Her assistant scheduled me for a consultation the following day. That evening, I returned to Marcus's apartment instead of going home. Lauren called repeatedly. I finally answered on the 10th call. "Where are you?" she demanded, her voice high with frustration. "You've been gone for over 24 hours, Nathan. This is ridiculous." "I'm staying with Marcus for a few days," I said calmly. "I need some space to think." "Space to think? About what? Because my mother was honest with you?" "Nathan, you're being incredibly immature about this." "Honest." She thought Patricia's cruelty was honesty. She thought I was the one being unreasonable. "Your mother came into our home and told me I'm not man enough for you," I said, keeping my voice level. "And you sat there and said nothing. You didn't defend me. You didn't tell her she was out of line. You just told me to let it go like I've been doing for 5 years. So no, Lauren, I'm not being immature. I'm being done." "Done? What does that mean?" "It means I'm tired of being disrespected. It means I'm tired of sacrificing and trying and bending over backward for people who don't appreciate it. It means something has to change." "You're being dramatic," she said, but I heard a note of uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Look, I'll talk to Mom, okay? I'll tell her to ease up. Just come home and we can work this out." "You've been saying you'll talk to her for 5 years, Lauren. It never happens. Or if it does, it doesn't change anything. I need more than empty promises." We talked for another 20 minutes, going in circles, getting nowhere. Lauren wanted me to come home and pretend everything was fine. I wanted acknowledgement that everything was not fine, that her mother's behavior was unacceptable, that Lauren's enabling of that behavior was damaging our marriage. We couldn't find common ground. The next day, I met with Linda Chen. She was a sharp woman in her 40s, professional and direct. I laid out the situation for her, and she took notes while I talked. "Here's the reality," Linda said when I finished. "You're in a marriage where you're not being treated as an equal partner. Your mother-in-law is actively hostile, and your wife is not setting appropriate boundaries. These situations rarely improve without serious intervention, usually therapy, and even then the success rate isn't great when one partner is conflict avoidant like your wife seems to be. So you think I should divorce her? I think you should be prepared for that possibility," Linda said carefully. "I'm not telling you what to do, but you came to see a divorce attorney, which suggests part of you has already made that decision. What I can tell you is what the process would look like, what your rights are, and how to protect yourself financially and legally." We spent an hour going over details. Since we had no children, divorce would be relatively straightforward. We'd have to divide assets acquired during the marriage, which included the house, cars, and savings. Given that I had been the primary earner, I would likely come out ahead in any settlement. Linda recommended documenting everything, keeping records of financial contributions, and continuing to stay somewhere else to establish that we were separated. "One more thing," Linda said as I was leaving. "Sometimes the best leverage in these situations is information. If you're serious about potentially ending this marriage, it might be worth investigating your mother-in-law's situation more closely. You mentioned she lives in her late husband's house, relies on his estate. Do you know the details of that estate? Who manages it? What the terms are?" "Not really," I admitted. "I know Richard left everything to Patricia, but I never looked into the specifics." "It might be worth doing some research," Linda said cryptically. "Sometimes family finances are more complicated than they appear on the surface." I left her office with a lot to think about. Instead of going back to Marcus's apartment, I drove to the city archives office. As a civil engineer for the city, I had access to public records and property databases that most people didn't. I had never thought to look into Patricia's property before, had never had a reason to. But Linda's comment had sparked my curiosity. I pulled up the records for Patricia's address, the massive house in Oakmont where she had lived for 30 years. The property was worth at least $2 million, sitting on 2 acres of prime real estate. The current deed was in Patricia's name, transferred from Richard's estate 3 years ago after his death. That all made sense. But then I looked at the history of the property, and something caught my eye. The house had been purchased 28 years ago, but not by Richard Sullivan. The original buyer was someone named Eleanor Blackwood. The property had been transferred to Richard Sullivan 5 years later, and then to Patricia after his death. Eleanor Blackwood. Why did that name sound familiar? I dug deeper, searching through old property records and transaction histories. Eleanor Blackwood had owned several properties in the city decades ago, all sold or transferred in the late 1990s. I cross-referenced with business records and found that she had been involved in real estate development, though not on the scale of Richard's later success. Then I found it. Buried in old incorporation documents from 25 years ago, Eleanor Blackwood and Richard Sullivan had been business partners in the early days of his commercial real estate company. She had been the initial investor, providing the capital that allowed Richard to purchase his first few properties. Their partnership had lasted about 7 years before Eleanor sold her stake back to Richard and retired. But here's where it got interesting. I found the terms of that buyout. Richard had paid Eleanor $800,000 for her share of the business in 1998. Part of that payment had been cash, but a significant portion had been structured as a long-term promissory note. Richard agreed to pay Eleanor $4,000 per month for 25 years, essentially an annuity. That payment schedule would end next year, 2026. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Patricia had been living in a house that was originally purchased by Richard's business partner. Richard had bought out that partner with a payment plan that was still active, which meant Patricia's estate was still making payments to Eleanor Blackwood, or her estate, or whoever inherited that note. I dug even deeper, searching for information about Eleanor. I found an obituary from 15 years ago. She had died at 68, survived by her son and daughter. The son was named Jonathan Blackwood, and the daughter was named Catherine Blackwood. Catherine Blackwood. I stared at that name for a long moment, certain I had seen it somewhere before. Then it clicked. I pulled out my phone and looked up the property records for my own house, the one Lauren and I had bought 3 years ago. The previous owner was listed as Catherine Blackwood. My heart started pounding. I had bought my house from Eleanor Blackwood's daughter, the same Eleanor Blackwood who had been Richard's business partner, the same Eleanor Blackwood whose estate was still receiving monthly payments from Patricia. This couldn't be a coincidence. I searched for more information about Catherine Blackwood, finding her current address. An apartment in the city not far from my office. She was 52 years old, worked as a real estate broker, had never married. I found her work number and, on impulse, called it. "Blackwood Realty, this is Catherine," a pleasant female voice answered. "Hi, Ms. Blackwood. This is Nathan Weber. I bought a house from you about 3 years ago on Maple Street." "Oh, yes. I remember. How are you? Everything okay with the house?" "The house is great. Actually, I'm calling about something else. This might sound strange, but I recently learned about your mother's business relationship with Richard Sullivan. I'm married to his daughter, and I'm trying to understand some family history." There was a pause. Richard Sullivan. Wow, that's a name I haven't heard in a while. Yes, my mother was his partner back in the day. She always spoke highly of him, said he was one of the most honorable businessmen she ever worked with. I found records showing that he bought her out with a payment plan. Is that still active? Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Weber, why are you asking about this? Please, call me Nathan. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I'm going through some personal issues with my wife's family, and I'm trying to understand the full financial picture. Can you tell me about the arrangement? Catherine hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. The payments are still coming, yes. $4,000 a month like clockwork for the past 25 years. My mother used that money to supplement her retirement. When she passed, my brother and I inherited the note. We split the payments. It's been a reliable income stream for both of us. Do you know how much longer the payments continue? They end in August of next year. After that, the debt is satisfied. Honestly, I'll miss it. That extra $2,000 a month has been helpful, especially when I was putting my niece through college. We talked for a few more minutes. Catherine was open and friendly, happy to share information about her mother's relationship with Richard. Eleanor had genuinely liked Richard, had respected his business acumen and integrity. She had sold her stake not because of any conflict, but because she wanted to retire and travel while she was still healthy enough to enjoy it. The payment plan had been structured to give both of them what they needed. Richard got full ownership of the business without having to liquidate assets, and Eleanor got a steady income stream for her retirement years. Richard's wife, Patricia, she still sends the checks? I asked. Well, I assume so. They come from the estate account. I've never actually dealt with her directly. Everything has always been handled through their accountant. After I hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot, pieces clicking together in my mind. Patricia lived in a house that had once belonged to Richard's business partner. She made monthly payments to that partner's children, payments that would end next year. Patricia had always acted like she was independently wealthy, like she had unlimited resources, like she was so far above me financially that I could never compete. But what if that wasn't entirely true? What if a significant portion of her monthly expenses went to servicing that old debt? What if her actual liquid wealth was less impressive than she pretended? I needed more information. I called Richard's former accountant, a man named Harold Green, who I had met at the funeral and a few times since. Harold had always been kind to me, had seemed to disapprove of Patricia's treatment of Lauren's choices, though he was too professional to say so directly. "Nathan," Harold said when he answered, "good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "Harold, I need to ask you about something sensitive. It's about Richard's estate and Patricia's finances." I heard him sigh. I wondered when someone would start asking questions. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. The real situation, not the version Patricia presents to the world." We met for coffee the next morning. Harold was in his 60s, gray-haired and dignified, preparing to retire himself in a few years. He ordered a black coffee and got straight to the point. "Patricia is not nearly as wealthy as she likes people to believe," he said quietly. "Richard left her well provided for, don't get me wrong, but a significant portion of his estate was tied up in structured payments and obligations. The business sale gave her about $3 million liquid, which sounds like a lot until you factor in her lifestyle." He pulled out a folder he had brought with him. "I've been managing Patricia's finances since Richard died. I'm telling you this because I think you have a right to know, and because, frankly, I'm concerned about where things are heading. Patricia spends about $15,000 per month. That includes the mortgage on the house, which still has $400,000 outstanding because Richard refinanced it several times to fund business investments." "Wait," I interrupted. "The house isn't paid off?" "No. They took out a large home equity line during the 2008 crisis to keep the business afloat. They were paying it down, but when Richard died, there was still a substantial balance. The monthly payment is $3,200. I was stunned. Patricia had always acted like she owned that massive house outright, like it was a symbol of her financial superiority. Harold continued, "There's also the payment to the Blackwood estate, $4,000 per month. Property taxes of about $2,000 per month. Maintenance and utilities on a house that size, easily another $2,000 per month. Patricia also has expensive taste in everything: clothes, travel, dining out, gifts, charitable donations to maintain her social status. She burns through money fast." "So what's her actual financial situation?" "She has about $1.8 million left in investments, down from the original $3 million 3 years ago. At her current spending rate, even with reasonable investment returns, she'll run through it all in about 15 years. She'll be 75 by then, and unless she makes some serious lifestyle changes, she could find herself in real financial trouble. I processed this information, recalibrating everything I thought I knew about Patricia's situation. Does Lauren know any of this? I doubt it. Patricia is very secretive about money. She wants everyone to think she's incredibly wealthy, untouchable. The reality is much more modest, though still comfortable by most standards. One more question. The house Patricia lives in, the one on Oakmont, if she died, who would it go to? Harold looked at me carefully. According to her current will, which I helped draft, it goes to Lauren. Everything does. Lauren is the sole heir. I left that meeting with my head spinning. I spent the rest of the week gathering information, quietly investigating, building a complete picture of the situation. And the more I learned, the more I realized how hollow Patricia's superiority complex really was. She lived in a house she didn't own outright, a house that had come from Richard's business partner, not his own success. She was hemorrhaging money to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't actually afford long-term. She was making monthly payments to the family I had unknowingly bought my own house from, and she had the audacity to call me insufficient, to claim I wasn't providing adequately for her daughter when her own financial situation was built on sand. The irony was almost too perfect. I lived in a house I owned outright, a house I had bought from Eleanor Blackwood's daughter with money I had saved through years of diligent work. Patricia lived in a house mortgaged to Eleanor Blackwood's legacy, making payments that drained her resources month after month. I thought about all the times Patricia had criticized my career, my earning potential, my financial choices. She had no idea that my conservative, careful approach to money had left me in a better long-term position than her spendthrift lifestyle. She had no idea that the house she lorded over me as a symbol of her superiority was actually a financial albatross around her neck. The question was, what did I do with this information? I spent another week at Marcus's apartment, thinking, planning, deciding what I wanted my future to look like. Lauren called constantly at first, then less frequently, as I continued to give her non-committal responses about when I might come home. Patricia, emboldened by my absence, apparently told Lauren I had abandoned her, that I was proving Patricia right about my inadequacy as a husband. The breaking point came when Lauren called me on a Friday evening, 2 weeks after I had left. "Nathan, this is ridiculous," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "You need to come home. You need to stop being so sensitive about what Mom said and act like an adult." "Sensitive?" I repeated, my calm finally cracking. "Lauren, your mother spent 5 years telling me I'm not good enough for you. She insults me in my own home. She has never once acknowledged anything I've done for this family, and you've never once stood up for me. And you think I'm the one being unreasonable? Mom is just protective. She wants the best for me. And I'm not the best? Is that what you think?" Silence. That silence told me everything I needed to know. After all the years together, after all the sacrifices, after everything I had done to build a life with Lauren, she couldn't bring herself to say that I was enough. "Okay," I said quietly. "I have something to tell you. I've been doing some research into your mother's finances, and there are some things you should know." "What are you talking about?" I told her. "About the house not being paid off, about the payments to Eleanor Blackwood's estate, about Patricia's dwindling resources and unsustainable spending, about the fact that in 15 years, if nothing changed, her mother would be in serious financial trouble. And here's the really interesting part," I continued. "The house I bought for us, the house your mother sneered at as too small and inadequate, I bought it from Catherine Blackwood, Eleanor's daughter. Your mother sends Catherine's family money every single month. I'm living in a house connected to your family's financial obligations, and I own it outright. Your mother's living in a house she's still paying for." "How dare you investigate my mother's finances?" Lauren hissed. "That's a massive invasion of privacy." "It's all public record, Lauren. Anyone could find this information if they bothered to look. I bothered to look because I'm tired of being made to feel inferior when the actual facts tell a very different story. So what? You think this makes you better than my mother?" "No," I said. "I think it makes me smarter with money than your mother. I think it makes me a better provider than she gives me credit for. And I think you need to decide whether you're going to spend the rest of your life letting your mother poison our marriage, or whether you're going to grow up and be a real partner to me." "I can't believe you're doing this," Lauren said, her voice shaking. Making this about money, throwing my mother's situation in my face. I'm not making this about money. Your mother did that every single time she criticized my career and my earnings and my house and my car. I'm just showing you the truth. Her version of success isn't as solid as she pretends it is. We argued for another hour. Lauren defended her mother, called me vindictive and petty. I stayed calm, laid out the facts, refused to back down. Finally, exhausted, I told her I would come home the next day to pick up more of my things, and we could talk in person. That night, I barely slept. I knew the conversation the next day would determine the course of my entire future. Part of me still hoped Lauren would wake up, would see how dysfunctional our situation had become, would choose our marriage over her mother's approval. But a larger, more realistic part of me knew that was unlikely. I arrived at the house Saturday afternoon. Lauren's car was in the driveway, and to my dismay, so was Patricia's Mercedes. Of course, Lauren had called her mother. Of course, Patricia would be there to fight her battles. I walked in to find them both sitting in the living room, clearly waiting for me. Patricia stood up immediately, her face twisted in rage. "How dare you snoop into my private finances?" she spat. "How dare you try to turn my daughter against me with lies and insinuations?" "I didn't lie about anything," I said calmly. "Everything I told Lauren is factually accurate. You had no right to investigate me. I had every right to understand the situation I've been living in. You've spent 5 years making me feel inadequate, Patricia. 5 years of criticism and judgment, and now I know that your entire position of superiority is built on Richard's success, not your own, and you're mismanaging what he left you." Patricia's face went red. "Richard worked hard to provide for me." "Yes, he did. He was a good man who built something from nothing, with help from Eleanor Blackwood. But what have you built, Patricia? What have you created or contributed? You've taken what Richard gave you and burned through it while looking down on people who actually earn their own way." "I don't have to listen to this," Patricia snapped. "Lauren, are you going to let him talk to me this way?" I turned to Lauren. "That's the question, isn't it? Are you going to keep letting your mother control our marriage? Are you going to keep prioritizing her feelings over mine? Because I'm done with this dynamic, Lauren. I'm completely done." Lauren looked between us, her face pale, her hands twisting together nervously. "Nathan, you're making this bigger than it needs to be." "No, your mother made it big by never being satisfied with anything I did. I'm just finally responding to 5 years of mistreatment." "Mistreatment?" Patricia laughed harshly. "You have no idea what real hardship is. You've had everything handed to you on a silver platter." "I've earned everything I have," I corrected her. "Through education and work and discipline, the same way Richard did, the same way Eleanor Blackwood did. But you wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Patricia? You married into wealth and have been coasting on it ever since." "Get out of my daughter's house," Patricia demanded. "Your daughter's house?" I pulled out a folder I had brought with me. "Let me show you whose house this is." I laid out the mortgage documents, the title, the payment records. I paid the down payment entirely from my savings. I've made every single mortgage payment. Lauren has contributed exactly $0 to this house. According to the law, this house is mine. So no, Patricia, I'm not leaving my house. But I am about to tell you something you need to hear. I turned to Lauren. "Your father was a good man, an honorable man. He built a successful business through hard work and smart partnerships. He provided for your family, made sure you had opportunities and security, but he also made a mistake. He enabled your mother's worst tendencies. He let her believe she was entitled to judge others, to look down on people who worked for their living. He let her develop this warped sense of superiority that has poisoned our marriage." Patricia opened her mouth to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "I'm not finished. Your mother lives in a house that was originally purchased by Eleanor Blackwood, Richard's business partner. That house still has $400,000 owed on it. Your mother sends $4,000 every month to Eleanor's children, including the woman I bought this house from. Your mother is burning through money at an unsustainable rate, and in 15 years she's going to find herself in financial difficulty. These are facts, not opinion." I looked directly at Patricia. "You've spent 5 years telling me I'm not man enough to provide for your daughter, but I've actually provided more financial stability for Lauren than you ever could. I own this house outright. I have no debt except a modest car payment. I have substantial savings and a secure career. My financial position is solid, while yours is precarious. So when you say I'm not man enough, what you really mean is I didn't inherit wealth like you did. I had to earn it, and that makes you uncomfortable because it reminds you that you've never earned anything yourself." The silence in the room was absolute. Patricia's face had gone from red to white, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Lauren stared at me like she'd never seen me before. "You're a cruel small man?" Patricia finally managed to say, her voice shaking. "No," I replied. "I'm a man who finally stopped accepting being treated poorly. There's a difference." I turned to Lauren. "I love you. I've loved you for 7 years, but I can't keep living like this. I can't keep sacrificing my self-respect to keep your mother happy. I need you to choose our marriage, where we set boundaries with your mother and build a partnership based on mutual respect or her approval. You can't have both anymore." Lauren's eyes filled with tears. "Nathan, you're asking me to choose between you and my mother. No, I'm asking you to choose to be an adult, to set appropriate boundaries, to be a partner instead of a daughter first. That's what marriage is supposed to be." "I need time to think," Lauren whispered. "Take all the time you need," I said. "But know that I'm serious. Things change now, or they end. Those are the only 2 options left." I went upstairs and packed more of my belongings, my movements methodical and calm, despite the emotional turmoil churning inside me. When I came back down, Patricia and Lauren were talking in urgent, hushed tones that stopped when they saw me. I walked past them to the door, then paused and turned back. "One more thing, Patricia. Eleanor Blackwood's daughter, Catherine, spoke very highly of Richard when I talked to her. She said her mother always told her that Richard was one of the most honorable businessmen she ever knew, that he kept his word, treated people fairly, and built his success through integrity. I thought you should know that Richard's legacy in the business community is about his character, not his bank account. You might want to think about what your legacy is going to be." I left them there, mother and daughter, in a house I had bought and renovated, surrounded by evidence that their worldview had been built on false assumptions. The next week was agony. Lauren called occasionally, always to argue, never to concede any point. Patricia apparently told everyone in their social circle that I had attacked her, investigated her illegally, and was trying to destroy their family. Some people believed her. Others, who had witnessed her behavior over the years, reached out to me quietly with support. Margaret, Lauren's aunt on Richard's side, called me with a surprising message. "Nathan, I heard what happened. Patricia has been spreading her version of events, but I wanted you to know that some of us are glad someone finally stood up to her. Richard loved his wife, but he knew she had problems. He used to tell me he worried about what would happen to her after he was gone, whether she'd be able to manage. I think he would have appreciated you looking out for the family's financial reality." That conversation gave me some comfort, but it didn't solve my immediate problem. My marriage was in limbo, and I needed to make decisions about my future. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Lauren finally agreed to meet me for dinner at a neutral location. She showed up looking tired, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual carefully coordinated outfits. We ordered food neither of us really ate, made awkward small talk, avoided the real issues, until finally Lauren set down her fork and looked at me directly. "I've been thinking about everything you said," she began. "About Mom, about our marriage, about boundaries, and I talked to a therapist." "That's good," I said cautiously. "She asked me a question that I couldn't answer. She asked me what I contribute to our marriage. Not what you contribute, but what I do. And Nathan, I couldn't think of a good answer. I realized I've been coasting, letting you handle everything, assuming you'd always be there no matter how I treated you." My heart rate picked up. This was more self-awareness than I had expected. "I've been a terrible wife," Lauren continued, her voice cracking. "I let Mom treat you horribly because it was easier than confronting her. I took you for granted because you were always so steady, so reliable. I stopped being a partner and became just a dependent, and I hate that about myself." "So, what do you want to do about it?" I asked quietly. "I want to fix it. I want to go to marriage counseling. I want to set boundaries with Mom. Real ones. I want to be someone you can be proud of, someone who deserves you." I looked at this woman I had married, seeing vulnerability and honesty I hadn't seen in years. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to give her another chance, but another part of me, the part that had been hurt and diminished for so long, was wary. "What about your mother?" Lauren took a shaky breath. "I told her that her behavior toward you has been unacceptable. I told her that if she can't treat you with respect, she's not welcome in our home or our lives. She didn't take it well. She's not speaking to me right now. How do you feel about that? Terrible, scared, but also relieved? Is that awful? I feel relieved that I finally stood up to her, even though I know it's going to be hard. We talked for 2 more hours. Lauren was more honest and open than she had been in our entire marriage, acknowledging her failures, accepting responsibility, expressing genuine remorse. She told me about conversations with the therapist that had helped her see how unhealthy her family dynamics were, how she had never really individuated from her mother, how she had been unconsciously recreating patterns from her childhood. I don't know if I can forgive everything all at once, I told her honestly. 5 years is a long time to feel not good enough. That damage doesn't heal overnight. I know, Lauren said, tears streaming down her face. I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately. I'm just asking for a chance to prove I can change. Please, Nathan, let me try. I agreed to try. We started marriage counseling the following week with a therapist who specialized in family systems and boundary issues. It was hard work, painful work, dredging up years of resentment and hurt. But slowly, incrementally, things began to shift. Lauren blocked her mother's number when Patricia sent a string of abusive texts, calling her ungrateful and disloyal. She stood firm even when other family members tried to intervene on Patricia's behalf. She started contributing more to our household, taking on responsibilities she had always left to me, showing up as an actual partner. Patricia, predictably, escalated. She tried to turn the family against us, spread rumors, even threatened to cut Lauren out of her will. Lauren's response was to shrug and say, "Then she can do that. I'm not choosing money over my marriage." That was the moment I began to truly believe Lauren had changed. 3 months into our reconciliation, Harold, the accountant, called me with interesting news. "Patricia is in serious financial trouble," he said. "She's demanding access to accounts and assets that don't exist. She apparently believed she had far more money than she actually does, and her spending has accelerated. She's going to need to make some major lifestyle changes soon." "Like what?" "Like selling the house. The mortgage is too expensive and she can't afford the upkeep. I've advised her to downsize, but she's refusing to listen. She thinks her current troubles are temporary and she'll figure something out." A week later, Patricia called Lauren. It was their first contact in months. Lauren put her on speaker so I could hear. "Lauren, darling, I need to talk to you about something important," Patricia said, her voice syrupy sweet. "I've been doing some financial planning, and I think it would be smart for you to start helping me with the house expenses, just temporarily until some investments mature." Lauren glanced at me, and I nodded encouragement. "No, Mom," Lauren said firmly. "I'm not giving you money to maintain a lifestyle you can't afford. But darling, it's my house, your father's house. Don't you care about preserving your inheritance? If you need to sell it, sell it. I don't need a big inheritance, Mom. I have my own life and my own financial security. What I needed was a mother who supported me and treated my husband with respect. The house doesn't matter." Patricia sputtered, tried different approaches, alternating between guilt trips and accusations. Lauren held firm, eventually ending the call when Patricia became too aggressive. "I'm proud of you," I told her. "That was harder than I thought it would be," Lauren admitted, "but also kind of liberating. I think I've been scared of her my whole life, and it feels good to finally not be scared anymore." Over the following year, our marriage rebuilt itself on a new foundation. We weren't the same people we had been, and our relationship wasn't the same either. It was better, healthier, more honest. We had both grown in ways we needed to. Patricia eventually sold her house, the grand symbol of her superiority. She moved into a modest condo, downsizing dramatically. Harold helped her create a sustainable budget, and she was learning, slowly and painfully, to live within her means. She reached out to Lauren a few times, always with requests for money or help, and Lauren gently but firmly declined while offering emotional support instead. The final payment to the Blackwood estate went out in August, and I sent Catherine an email telling her about the connection between our families. She was fascinated and touched, and we met for coffee. She showed me photos of her mother and shared stories about Eleanor's friendship with Richard. It turned out that Eleanor had always hoped Richard would find a way to keep the business and his family life balanced, that she had worried about Patricia's influence on him. "Mom used to say that Richard was a good man married to the wrong woman," Catherine told me. But she also said that Richard made his choice and lived with it honorably. She respected that about him, even when she didn't understand it. On the anniversary of the day Patricia had called me not man enough, Lauren surprised me with a gift. It was a framed photo of our house, professionally taken, with a plaque beneath it that read, "Built by us, owned by us, home for us." "I wanted you to have a reminder," she said, "of everything you built, of everything you are, of the fact that you were always more than enough, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it and say it." We hung it in the living room, right where Patricia could see it if she ever visited, though that seemed unlikely. That evening, sitting on our back patio watching the sunset, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. A year ago, I had been standing in this same house being told I wasn't man enough. I had felt small, inadequate, defeated. Now, I felt strong, valued, and confident in my worth. I had learned that sometimes standing up for yourself means risking everything. That truth is more powerful than pretension. That real wealth is measured in integrity and character, not just bank accounts. And that sometimes the people who act most superior are actually the most insecure about their own position. Patricia never apologized for her years of cruel treatment. I didn't expect her to. But she also never criticized me again, perhaps finally understanding that I had information and backbone she hadn't anticipated. The power dynamic had shifted permanently. As for Lauren and me, we were making it work. Not perfectly, not without effort, but authentically. She showed up for our marriage in ways she never had before, and I had learned to set boundaries and demand respect instead of accepting whatever scraps of approval were thrown my way. Sometimes I thought about the man I had been, desperate for Patricia's acceptance, willing to diminish myself to avoid conflict. That man was gone. In his place was someone stronger, clearer, more grounded in his own worth. The house that Patricia had sneered at as inadequate became the place where I learned to value myself. The financial situation she had mocked became the foundation of actual security, and the career she had dismissed as insufficient became the source of my self-respect and achievement. Today, I've learned that real strength isn't about how much money you have or how big your house is. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let others define it for you. It's about standing up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. It's about choosing authenticity over approval. Patricia thought she could break me by telling me I wasn't enough. Instead, she pushed me to discover just how much I actually was, and that's a gift, even if she never meant it that way. Have you ever dealt with someone who constantly made you feel inadequate? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and recognizing your own worth. Sometimes the people who look down on you are standing on nothing but illusions, and the moment you realize, that is the moment you become truly free.